Hey, hello, cruel world, and hello, everybody. And if you're in the Fargo-Moorhead area, you know what a humdinger of a day it is. Here at KRFF 95.9 LPFM, Moorhead, Fargo, RadioFreeFargo.org online. You can check it out. You can stream wherever you are in the world. Take us camping. You can pick you up some merch. You can donate if you like. Welcome, everybody. Again, KRFF, Radio Free Fargo. Right before me, it's Thursday, noon to 3, side stage with Trav. He had a bunch of hot women in here talking about rock and roll. Again, I hate to let you down, but there's not going to be any hot women today, but maybe next week. But anyways, my subject matter is cannabis legalization, cannabis in a positive light. That's what we talk about. We're going to run through some red tape, and then at 4:20, we're going to open a big fat bag of cannabis news. This Thursday's no different. No Stinky Arts Music Mark this Thursday. I assume he'll be back next Thursday. We got Locals on the 8, and then Radio Free Madness, and then Black Ring Oblivion. I think I got that right, but now that I said it out loud, maybe not. But I always forget those guys, that they round off Thursday. Again, Canna-Talk ND with Wilson. Every Thursday, 4 o'clock, I get in here. 4:20, open a big fat bag of cannabis news. And we got a little late start here. Just want to mention DCR Brewing and Radio Free Fargo, that's us, presents Slay the Alleyway. That's August 14th. It's a free show. Skin of Our Teeth, Gypsy Wizard, and then my friends, or maybe just one friend, I only know one, but Prediction of the Witch. And it's a benefit show, metal show. Come check it out. This show's brought to you by Black Cottage Alchemy. And most notably, their body butter. Black Cottage Alchemy on Facebook, blackcottagealchemy.com. You can get her products over at Tochi Products. They have other things too, but mostly the body butter I recommend. There's no question that's hands down something you want to keep around your person. And there is the ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act petition in there. Orange Records has opened their door again after some sort of sunning, maybe vacation or something that happened. I don't know. But you can get in there and sign that as well. Again, Canna-Talk ND with Wilson. It's Thursday. Welcome, everybody. The New Life Center helps people who are homeless and hurting go from merely surviving to truly thriving. Their aim is to help people in need discover value and find hope. The New Life Center has evolved into a multifaceted emergency and crisis service center. To learn more about NLC, visit their website at www.fargonlc.org or give them a call at 701-235-4453. And again, I believe cannabis was created by the man upstairs. And as your local tongue-talking cannabis activist, I have to invite you to Antioch Church, South Fargo. Now, let's strap in and get this show cooking. The first thing I've got for you guys is Electric Avenue, Shaggy. No, Electric Avenue, Shaggy. You're listening to Canna-Talk ND with Wilson on KRFF 95.9, RadioFreeFargo.org. Anywhere in God's green earth here, you can listen to me. You can listen to Side Stage with Trav right before me, noon to 3. And then I wanted to shout out that ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act is going to be down in the park this weekend, as well as this radio station. So if you're down there dancing around, why don't you dance up to the ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act table and sign it. Get your buddies, go in there and sign it too. Because that's how you get cannabis legalized, is you get people active. And activating is actually a verb. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But again, 4:20, we'll open a bag of cannabis news. This Thursday's no different. And I'll be back in this coming Thursday. But again, if you're in the Fargo-Moorhead area, how awesome is this weather? Like if it was like, if you made me guess from 1 to 10, I'd say it's like about 11.6. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't include it in the 1 to 10. You're right, because it's pretty phenomenal. And we're going to talk about cannabis in a positive light. And we got a late start out of here, but I'm right fresh out of the gate, and I can feel my gears cooking because I had coffee before the show, and I've been anti-caffeine along with the sugar and all that kind of just goes hand in hand. But man, caffeine is my homeboy, and I just, you know what I'm saying? If I can't have coffee, just kill me. Just kill me. Just, even do it ugly too, just like maybe with a rope, because coffee is good. And so we're not going to talk about coffee. We're going to talk about cannabis legalization, the progress cannabis is making, and, the medical benefits of such. No Stinky Arts Music Mart after me, but we got Locals on the 8, Radio Free Madness, and then the Black Ritual Oblivion. I'm probably killing it, but just if you're into metal and grindy, bassy stuff, and I'm guessing, then check it out this tonight. I think it's like 10 to midnight. Again, I'll find out. I just didn't. I thought for some reason that Radio Free Madness wrapped up your Thursday, so I apologize to the DJ that comes in after that. But I believe it's Black Ring Ritual. Maybe the word Oblivion's in there. but it's metal stuff. So if you're into that and all your clothes are just one color, come check that out on Radio Free Fargo, KRFF 95.9. Again, ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act. It is the only petition being circulated in the great state of North Dakota. Be legendary and sign it. 21 plus to possess 12 plants. You can have 6 not mature, 6 mature, and a licensed business. Again, it's I don't know. Is it on the middle ground? I mean, January, I believe that the signatures all need to be into the Secretary of State, otherwise known as the SOS, otherwise known as Economics. I don't know if it's the same one. But anyway, we're talking about cannabis here on a beautiful Thursday here on your radio dial. I'm going to stick here all hour. 4:20, we're going to open a big fat bag of cannabis news. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things I can talk about, and then I'm riffing after that. I mean, they say no news is good news when it comes to, controversial stuff. But when you're talking about it, like I'm talking about it, it's nice to have some stuff to talk about. But let's just get into this music here. I got a double shot by the Doobie Bros. So I'm excited to play these. First up, Zo Mexico, then Cannonball on Radio Free Fargo. Yes, indeed. I never thought I'd be able to say that was a double shot of brand new Doobie Brothers, but it is, in fact, brand new stinking Doobie Brothers. And in fact, this album isn't completely even available yet. There's they call it a quick LP. But first of all, it was Zo Mexico and then Cannonball. Again, the Doobie Brothers, I do a show about cannabis and cannabis legalization. So if there's new Doobie Brothers, I am bound by some sort of code that I just made up on my own to play the Doobie Brothers here on Radio Free Fargo, KRFF 95.9. We are right at the door of the coveted 420, where I open a big fat bag of cannabis news, and we are right at the heels of that. In fact, I'm almost ready to push the button where it starts to play the things. So anyway, Canna-Talk ND on YouTube, Canna-Talk ND on Facebook, Canna-Talk ND on YouTube. You can go and listen to this minus the music. It's been Sunday. We're kind of, we're busy and we're trying to come up with something so you guys can depend on us. And so we'll do better. Philip Canna-Head Pilko also does the stuff, and he's the one that gets this ready. So anyway, ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act, that's the petition being circulated. You can sign it Orange Records and Tochi products. And while you're in there, get some Black Cottage Alchemy products, whose has graciously sponsored this show. And now, here comes, y'all. Boom.
Yo, it's Wilson from Canna-Talk ND. The super awesome show you're getting ready to listen to. I think you should go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll wait. Okay, enjoy the show.
And we'll fade. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Hey, Pete. Nice to see you. You brought Nancy with you. Good. It's Louise, too. I love when Louise shows up. Brings another friend that I just can't think of a name to come up with, but that's all right. Canna-Talk ND with Wilson. That's where we're at. We're going to talk about cannabis legalization, cannabis news in general. In fact, the first thing on deck is Cannabis Moment, and we're going to talk about Wyoming officials clear 2022 marijuana ballot initiatives for signature gathering. I'm going to try to make this less, clinical. But like I said, there's not a whole lot. Like last show was really fun. A lot of fun stuff, like Walmart's growing and all the neighbors were going bananas over this smell. They thought it was like, I don't know, this sounds kind of harsh, but it was kind of like, they thought like it was their Holocaust, But anyway, Canna-Talk ND with Wilson on KRFF 95.9. Strap in. If you got a medical card, stick it on your forehead. Put 3 ice cubes in that long cylinder thing and listen to me talk to you for 20 to 16 to 4 minutes. And again, math has never been my strong suit. And we're going to talk about... So first of all, let me just say this. ND for Freedom of Cannabis Act. It's a petition being circulated. 21 plus, 12 plants, licensed business. It would amend the Constitution, which kind of gets the proverbial panties up in the metaphorically hind end. Or is it crack? Crack is whack, by the way. And sugar's still been getting me. I'm still sugar-free. But before we go any further, if you're new to this show, put your right hand up in the air and put your other hand on your bag and say, so I do swear, so help me God, to never call it marijuana, never call it dope, or never call it weed, only cannabis from here on out, so help you God. Welcome. Everybody's cleared for takeoff, And we're going to talk about Wyoming. But ND for Freedom, the Cannabis Act, Orange Records, Tochi Products, and anywhere in the state, just Google it, and then you can find out. And if you got some free time, go get yourself a hard clipboard, get you a petition, and hustle. Because, again, the time is running out. And that's what's going on in North Dakota. Or, like I say, educating yourself and educating others on the benefits of cannabis. Or kick sugar and tell me that, cannabis is way worse than sugar. Kick sugar and tell me cannabis isn't a little lamer than people. Because I think they just give it too much credit. It's way up there with heroin. And again, if you do heroin and then do cannabis, you're going to be sorely disappointed. At the very least, you're going to be confused. You're going to be like, whoa. This one thing, I felt like I zipped up a pillow with like unicorns and stuff. And now I'm moderately hungry and I'm tired from a long day of work. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's what I'm saying. But welcome. We're going to talk about cannabis. Cannabis moment. Wyoming. Oh, South Dakota. So they're still waiting on the judges to I don't know what the word is. They're deliberating on whether or not the ballot, the ballot that they voted on, 54%. So it had been circulated. It got on the ballot. They voted it in, and then they thought it violated the single subject rule, and they're still deliberating. It should be a Thursday soon, but it feels strategic, they say in South Dakota, that they're keeping it hemmed up. So what they're hoping is they're hoping you will not give up hope. You won't do anything else to get cannabis legalized, and you'll just hope that these judges are going to deliberate in your favor. Well, everybody knows that every day that they don't come out and say if it violated the single subject rule in South Dakota anybody in their right mind knows that they're holding it on purpose. So I believe there's 5 ballot initiatives that the super awesome people of South Dakota have already filed. So once they get their hearts broken from something that they'd already got on the ballot and passed, they've got stuff in the wings to shotgun it through. So if you're in South Dakota and that happens, get behind these because, again, the train is rolling and you're not going to stop. It just picks up speed and then just gets more determined and smarter from all the things they've got to get around to get a particular thing done. So South Dakota, that's what's happening. Waiting on the judges to deliberate on whether or not something the people passed and voted on violated a single subject rule. And it's 5 judges. I guess you need 3 of them to agree. And they should have came out in July as to what they decided. And so every Thursday that we get to is supposedly the day that they would decide. So anyway, now we're going to talk about Wyoming. Advocates needed to turn in at least 100 valid signatures per measure to the Secretary of State to formally get a process started on their proposal to decrim cannabis and legalize medical cannabis. And they turned in more than double that amount. This week, the office confirmed that the campaign had met the requirement and cleared them for broad signature gathering once the Attorney General's office approves summary language and petition packets. The initiatives are being backed by the National Libertarian Party. Shout out LP, as well as Wyoming Normal. So that, in my head, I feel like that means there's going to be money behind it, so that's cool. The effort launched, so it's not completely grassroots. You know what I mean? The effort launched, and I would argue that South Dakota, without, I think it was like the MPL, like the National Cannabis Project, I forget. That the effort launched after state lawmakers advanced but failed to pass a bill to legalize cannabis this session. Christine Stenquist, the campaign senior strategist, told Cannabis Moment that they have a combination of volunteers and paid canvassers, that's a good sign, will be working to collect a required 41,000 and some valid signatures from registered voters per measure by February 14th. To qualify for the ballot, we know what districts we need to hit. We know what counties. We know our numbers. We know even the people who are registered voters were likely to support us. It's a very surgical campaign. We'll shout out Wyoming. And again, anytime you read about medical cannabis, and decrims, it means they're still in the ice age. Like Mississippi, I think they finally got some stuff done. Louisiana now has a pretty sweet decrim, and so. North Dakota, just a quick review, Delta 8 is still technically allowed to be sold, all right? Because when Governor Doug Buzzkill, when he failed to veto that, whatever that bill was, I forget what it was called, 1445, I'm just guessing, literally just guessed, that they were sued. There's a lawsuit pending on whether or not they should have did whatever they did, because a lot of people lost inventory, business owners, whatever. So they believed it was unjustly passed. And so while that's being deliberated, while North Dakota still, the lawsuit's still pending, then technically Delta 8 is legal in North Dakota to purchase. But as soon as the judge smacks the gavel and says, you guys lost, Delta 8 goes back to its illegality, then cops can go into a store that's currently selling it and pop them. So that's why a lot of stores aren't continuing to sell it, because they're not going to get an email technically when they would have to stay almost in the courtroom to see if and when they would have to hurry up, text their workers and say, get all the Delta 8 out of the closet and get it to the bar. All right, well, what? But anyway, so technically Delta 8 is still technically up for purchase. And there are stores that do carry it here in North Dakota. But again, those are the ones that are trying to make that last buck. And again, at any moment, the lawsuit could fail, and then Delta 8 would go back to its illegality. But it was my information and my understanding that Delta 8 can still be purchased because of the lawsuit that has that pending. So anyway, let's talk about Michigan. Michigan spends $20 million in cannabis revenue to study medical cannabis for veterans. So let's give Michigan, who's spending some cash to study medical cannabis for veterans, a hand. But anyway, a pair of research projects funded by $20 million in tax revenue will analyze the effects of medical cannabis in military vets, state officials announced on Tuesday. The bulk of the money, nearly $13 million, will examine the efficacy of cannabis, in treating the medical conditions of the U.S. Armed Service veterans and preventing veteran suicide. The grant will fund the next step of a study researchers say is the first clinical trial of inhaled botanical cannabis for PTSD, and only the second to compare the safety and efficacy of cannabis against a placebo. Another $7 million in cannabis revenue-funded grant money was awarded to Wayne State University, which is partnered with researchers. And again, they're going to look at a variety of mental health disorders: PTSD, anxiety, sleep disorder, depression, and suicidality. Is that a word? Both new grants come from Michigan's $20 million veteran cannabis research grant program. See, you just can see, like, when I read cannabis, I'm reading it in place of the other words that I've solemnly swore not to say. And it's so embedded in our fabric that, it's really sad. Because again, everybody knows that word was created out of racism and greed. And a lot of people calling it that, they're not going to say they're racist. But if they understood, just like some words you can't say, I believe the one that rhymes with Barijana should also be just, let's not say it anymore, because that's not what it is. It's a jive slang used to reference a different ethnicity. Well, a couple of them. And then pitted, another color of skin to treat those two ethnicities differently. And so to kind of like label them, they were using a word that hadn't been used prior. It was just hemp or cannabis. So anyway, PTSD, depression, and substance use disorders are all common among vets, and the disorders are also significant contributors to suicidality. The tax revenue will fund phase 2. The research will also not exclude military veterans with major depressive disorder and substance use. A total of 320 veterans across 4 sites, 2 of which are in Michigan, will spend 5 weeks self-administering inhaled, self-titrated doses of high-quality botanical cannabis on an outpatient basis for treatment of PTSD. So that's really, really good news, and I'm happy to hear that. And I wish everybody did it, to be honest with you. Vets should have to work the hardest, or the least hard. They should have to work very little to get cannabis as a medicine. And I don't know. I don't know what we can do to do it, but if anything, just decrim it, just say if a vet gets caught, or not caught, but if a vet has cannabis that he's using medicinally, he would get charged differently than I would. In fact, they should just shake his hand, thank him for his service like any good God-fearing American, and then let him toke his way down the road, or toke his way down the street. Okay, I don't know. So let's let's keep cruising along here. I have got this. Now, this is PubMed.gov. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I dare say I'm an entertainer. But I am just giving the news as I see it. And when something comes up that, rings me right. I'm not sure if that's the phrase. But anyway, cannabidiol. We'll go cannabidiol inhibits SARS-CoV-2 replication and promotes the host innate immune response. So basically, this is an article, a study that showed that cannabidiol crowds out the cell and pushes this SARS-CoV-2, like it prohibits it from replicating and promotes the host innate immune response. So I'm going to read a little bit here. The rapid spread of COVID-19 underscores the need for new treatments. Here we report the CBD, a compound produced by the cannabis plant, inhibits SARS-CoV-2 infection, CBD, and its metabolite 7-OH-CBD, but not congeneric cannabinoids potently block this SARS-CoV-2 and from replicating in the lung epithelial cells. CBD acts after cellular infection, inhibiting viral gene expression and reversing many effects of the SARS-CoV-2 on host gene transcription. CBD induces interferon expression and upregulates its antiviral signaling pathway. Wow, you guys tripped out now? I mean, two of you is falling asleep here, and the other half is surprised that I can read all this. A cohort of human patients previously taking CBD had significantly lower SARS-CoV-2 infection, and it was up to an order of magnitude relative to matched pairs or the GenPop. This study highlights CBD and its active metabolites 7-OH-CBD as a potential preventative agent and therapeutic treatment for SARS-CoV-2 at early stage of infection. Now, I'm not going to bother you anymore with that, but you can Google it yourself. It's the National Library of Medicine, PubMed.gov. Just type in CBD inhibits SARS-CoV-2 replication. And I thought it was pretty interesting. And what I made you guys listen to sounded pretty good. And again, I shouldn't be taken seriously. Do your own research, I feel compelled to say. But I always believe, I utilized cannabis when I went and had all my teeth pulled because I knew they were going to fit me for dentures or whatever, partials. And I didn't want to be all swollen. Because I wasn't going to be able to get back to Mexico for any fixing of it. Which reminds me, Canna-Talk ND with Wilson, that's what you're listening to here on KRFF, Radio Free Fargo. Stick with me. We're going to keep talking about it. I just had a brain gap right there. But anyway, that's what's happening every Thursday. And that's what you're listening to now. We talk about cannabis in a positive light and just general cannabis discussions. We just talked about something really heavy. How I think I just read a science paper, with a lot of words I've never seen before. And now we're going right into the Vancouver Sun. It's the Gastown riots. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Gastown riot. And it was back in 1971, and we're gonna look at it here a little bit and see what we got going on. So again, Vancouver Sun, Gastown riot. A young family was caught in the middle as police descended on protesters. So you can see the look on my face. I've got such fear trying to protect him and my wife. The baby buggy was in the street. We ran up there into a restaurant, and the cops came, and the horses were sliding because the streets were brick. They were sliding, and these guys were lashing these batons around, said Frank Barazul. On August 7th, 1971, Frank Barazul went for a walk in Gastown with his wife, Sheila, and baby son, Toby. Unbeknownst to the couple, protesters had organized a Saturday night Grasstown smoke-in and street jamboree, which sounds horrible. Just kidding. At Maple Tree Square against a police crackdown on cannabis. And the Barazul family walked straight into one of Vancouver's most infamous events, the Gastown riot. When the family reached Corral and Water Streets, they found hundreds of people milling about around the corner, many smoking cannabis. A fake 10-foot-long joint was passed around as a prop. There was a chant mocking Vancouver's anti-hippie mayor, Tom Campbell, and a trio of young guys clambered up on a balcony at the Hotel Europe and mooned the crowd. Initially, everything was pretty lighthearted because the protest had been organized by members of the Youth International Party, Yippie, which was more Groucho than Marx. It was always supposed to be about fun, said Peter Pronsos, who helped organize the event. It was never about confronting the police. But the police felt otherwise. When the protesters spilled onto Water Street and blocked traffic, 50 policers arrived in riot gear with 4 mounted police in front. Vancouver Police Inspector Bob Abercrombie, not to be confused with Fort Abercrombie, south of us here, took out a bullhorn and ordered the crowd to disperse. The crowd ignored him, and the police marched in, beating people with batons and riding crops. They ordered, get off the street and everything, and nobody moved, recalls Barazul, who's now 76. Now, he'd be a cool guy to interview. The protesters just held up the giant joint. They weren't doing anything like breaking windows or any violence. They just weren't listening to the order to move. So then the cops charged us. Vancouver Sun photographer Glenn Baglow was at the scene, and he captured the defining image of the Gastown riot, 2 policemen on horseback charging into the crowd on the sidewalk at Alexander and Carroll. In the middle of the parking crowd is a terrified Frank Barazul holding his infant son close. It was scary. It was scary as heck with a little kid, he said, who was an elementary school teacher, or who was an elementary school teacher at the time. You can see the look. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? I mean, if you're out with your kid and your wife and you see a guy holding up a big joint and there's Mounties on horses, and you might, I don't know, maybe not go through that area. However, I'm really curious. I would have got sucked up into it. I remember when, I don't know if they were called the riots or whatever happened this summer or last. Was it 2 summers? Well, whatever, when it happened in downtown Fargo and they were shooting pepper spray and everything, I was right in the middle of it. I had I had like a handkerchief wet, not to get pepper spray in my eyes. And I should have been, an investigative journalist then because it was really neat. But again, my kid wasn't happy with me. I really shouldn't have been there. And so that's kind of what this is, too. You can see the look on my face. I've got such fear trying to protect him and my wife. The baby buggy was in the street. We ran up there into a restaurant, and the cops came, and the horses were sliding, and these guys were lashing out with whatever. So the Barazuls escaped the mayhem by running up Alexander, then circled back along to Hastings where their car was parked, but the craziness found them again. These cops came down on their horses, chasing people. We were in this little sports car, and they looked like giants. This was like a half hour later. Some protesters fought back. 80 people wound up being arrested, but when the press reports came out Monday, it was the police who came under fire, not the protesters. The Sun had several reporters at the melee who saw pools of blood at several locations. Police on horseback riding down the sidewalk, driving people into doorways, pinning them there while whacking at them with their sticks. I paraphrase. The paper also reported seeing a young woman being dragged, screaming, held her by the hair, one arm, blah, 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 blah. Gastown merchant was so incensed. What a great use of the word. Was so incensed at the police, he phoned Alderman Art Phillips and Ed Sweeney to come see what was happening. And a police car almost drove into Phillips, who would become Vancouver's mayor in 1972. So Provincial Judge Thomas Dome conducted an inquiry into the riot and found police had overreacted because of a false report that windows had been broken. The plot thickens, because they didn't break a window. These guys assume they did. So already you've got this incredulousness, like, what are you messing with us for? And they're like, well, what do you mean, you big window breaker? So Dom said in some cases police had used unnecessary, unwarranted, and excessive force. In the end, a couple of police were demoted and one protester was sentenced to 4 months in jail for throwing a brick. The main organizers, Ken Lester and Eric Sommer, were never charged. Peter Pronto said the public backlash against the police actions in the Gastown riot had lasting implications. The cops were beating up people in restaurants and tourists, and the backlash in the report was so negative that I don't think the police ever got violent with us yippies again. They had attacked us once before, once at a peaceful march at Granville, like even mine was 1971. I'd gotten jumped by cops, but after Gastown, I don't think they ever got violent. Pretty soon after that, Mayor Campbell was gone, and that really helped. The photo of the horse standing on the baby carriage was pretty striking. Fortunately, the baby was out of it. And you can Google, this Gastown riots, and you can see these pictures. But these Baruzol were just terrorists or tourists in Gastown, not terrorists. I mean, there is just a word different between terrorists and tourists, but they're completely different. We weren't there for this demonstration, but boy, we sure got caught in it. So that's from the Vancouver Sun. Police charging a crowd because they had heard there was a window broken. August 7th, 1971, which is just a mere couple days ago. So, what do we got now? This is the Daily Beast. Cannabis prisoner sentenced to life before Trump pardon is back in custody. And I remember this guy. In 2010, a federal judge sentenced Tony DeJohn, which kind of sounds like a salad dressing, don't it, to life, plus 10 years on a nonviolent cannabis charge. Because it was DeJohn's third conviction, the judge was required by law to hit him with the mandatory minimum. He was just 31 years old. 11 years later, DeJohn was from upstate New York, had been locked in a high-security facility. He was granted clemency by Donald Trump. He was released from prison on January 2021. But today, like now, Dijon is back in federal custody. The now 47-year-old will be spending the next 6 months in a Pennsylvania halfway house, but not because he broke any new laws. In the U.S. today, there are prisoners serving draconian sentences for nonviolent cannabis offenses, many of them in states where cannabis is now legal, which just blows my mind. The issue is a surreal one for Craig Sazal, cannabis lifer whom Trump also granted clemency, who described watching from the confines of a prison cell while doing life for cannabis. A 60-minute segment on the booming cannabis business. Cecil, a skilled jailhouse lawyer who now works for the nonprofit Last Prisoner Project, has advocated for Dijon and other pot lifers and helped Dijon out with some cash when he first got home. I'm here in Illinois where we have rec and marijuana stores all over the place, Cecil's told the Daily Beast. But since it's still a federal crime, I'm on supervised release. Could I walk into one of those stores and buy some cannabis, which would be legal under Illinois law? It's actually a federal crime and would subject me to 5 years in federal pen as a violation of my supervised release. Other violations that can send a person back to jail include things like breaking curfew, missing a probation appointment, or failing a drug test. See, now, when you think about, supervised probation, I mean, you don't think of federal, but I guess if you're in a federal prison, if you committed a federal crime, well, then it's not about the state you're in. It's about the U.S. So if you get into trouble, then they're going to look at you federally. And federally, it's still up there with heroin. So other violations that can send a person back to jail, I already said, I'm going to read it again, like breaking curfew. So let's say you're on, like supervised release and you had life. They're going to treat you a little seriously. And then if you, they're actually hoping, expecting you to mess up. And all you do is miss a probation appointment. You could go back and serve the rest of that life, so the risk is pretty high. So before he was finally let go in January, Dijon had been denied release twice. And while his record in prison wasn't spotless, Dijon, who was given glowing reviews by his prison work detail supervisors, was only written up for 4 infractions, of which one could just be considered serious. His federal defenders, we call public pretenders, wrote in a June 2020 motion to get Dijon sprung on compassionate grounds. He said, moreover, Dijon has not committed a disciplinary violation since 2016, more than 4 years ago. All this suggests that Dijon is aging out of recidivism. 8 months later, Dijon was set free. However, he will be under the supervision of a federal probation officer for the next 10 years. See, so he's under the supervision under federal probation rules. So since his release, Dijon had been in full compliance with the conditions of his probation. His lawyer wrote in a June 2021 motion requesting Dijon be allowed to move to North Carolina. But since he had been away for so long, Dijon was finding it difficult to rebuild his life in New York. I could imagine. His only friends in the area were either people with prior convictions or ones who were not necessarily committed to living law-abiding lives. Criminals. So Dijon, who had worked in construction before he was sent away, had a hard time finding a steady job. Fortunately, he was offered construction in the area of Raleigh, North Carolina. His potential employer has offered to put up his cash, or put him up until he can afford his own place. According to the lawyer, Dijon made numerous informal attempts for approval from the probation officer to relocate, but they didn't get it back to him. So Mr. Dijon is committed to building a law-abiding life, allowing him to relocate from his prior connections in central New York. In early May, wouldn't you know, Dijon's probation officer showed up at his home in New York, and the officer saw a GMC Yukon parked in Dijon's driveway. Asked who it was, Dijon said it belonged to a friend of his wife's. When the parole officer ran a DMV check, they found it was registered not to a friend of Dijon's wife, but a friend of Dijon's named Michael Hirsch. Hirsch had loaned the vehicle to Dijon shortly after his release, and when someone goes away for a decade, free world relationships often go by the wayside. So when you get out of prison, think of who's been your friends for the last 10 years. Who's he going to lean on and say, hey, help me with a car? A lot of people in prison come from pretty destitute families. So Hirsch had been one of Dijon's 14 co-defendants back in 2005, and so he was convicted of a state charge. And in June 2021, more than a month after Como legalized it, the Oswego County Probation Office searched Hirsch's residence and seized some 50 cannabis plants from the property. So on June 17th, Dijon's probation officer seized his cell phone based upon a reasonable suspicion that he was associated with the convicted felon Hirsch. So a review of Dijon's cell phone identified that they had been in daily communication and they were associating in person at each other's residence. And so additionally, the review of the offender's cell phone identified that Dijon is in regular communication via text messages and is sending money to their commissary accounts in the Bureau of Prisons. So, those are the people that his back to make sure he wouldn't get beat up in prison. So a month later, Dijon admitted to having been in touch with Hirsch as well as prison inmates. However, Dijon had stated on his monthly supervision report that he had not been associated with a known felon. Dijon also hadn't informed his probation officer that he had moved from the house he shared with his wife. So the probation officer is recommending the offender be placed on Federal Residential Reentry Center for a period of 6 months as a result of his recent actions. Dijon is not presently allowed to have a cell phone. He has not been granted phone privileges. And Dijon's lawyer did not respond to a request for a comment. So as far as Tony, is he really a threat to society, said Cecil. Did anything that they cited in that supervised release violation show that he was a threat to anybody? No, it's like this cannabis charge. Have you ever heard of somebody being forcibly giving cannabis to anybody? No, people come and ask for it. So what an interesting story that I brought to you guys. Canna-Talk ND with Wilson every Thursday, 4 o'clock. I walk in, 4:20, I zip open a bag of cannabis news, and I'm about ready to close it here. But you hear me every Thursday right after Side Stage with Trav. And then it's Stinky Arts Music Mart after me, but not today. Then Radio Free, Locals on the 8 and Radio Free Madness. And then Black Ritual Oblivion. I'll look it up and make sure, whatever. We talk about cannabis in a positive light every Thursday here on KRFF 95.9, RadioFreeFargo.org. You can stream it. And we are cooking with greats. This hour of programming on KRFF. Let me start over. This hour of programming on KRFF LP FM Radio Free Fargo 95.9 FM is being underwritten by Flatland Guitar and Luthery. Flatland Guitar is your full-service guitar shop and your exclusive dealer for Yamaha, Taylor, and Paul Reed Smith guitars and other brands. They do guitars on consignment. They take trade-ins and have a full-service on-site repair center. Check out Flatland Guitar and Luthery on Facebook or visit them in person at their location at 1450 25th Street South in Fargo. Thank you, Flatland Guitar. Now, I've got a brand. Well, first of all, Tom Jones just celebrated his 670th birthday yesterday. And wouldn't you know, he kicked out another album. And they say he didn't do covers, he just reimagined something. And I've got Samson and Delilah, which is a Grateful Dead classic. And I believe they wrote it, but maybe not. Here's Samson and Delilah, brand new Tom Jones. You're welcome. Jones, Samson and Delilah. That's off his Surrounded by Time. That's brand stinking new here on Radio Free Fargo. KRFF 95.9 is what you got yourself into here. Every Thursday I get in here right after Side Stage with Trav, noon to 3. 4 to 5, it's me. 4:20, I give you a big fat bag of cannabis news. This Thursday was no different. Normally it's Stinky Arts Music Mart. Right after me. That's not happening today, but next Thursday you can assume that that's the case. Locals on the 8, Radio Free Madness, and then a metal show that's got the word Oblivion in it, I think. But I swear to the DJ that comes in, I'm going to look. I'm going to make sure I have it. Next Thursday I'll be able to tell you exactly what's on here at 95.9 on Thursdays. This show is graciously brought to you by Black Cottage Alchemy, Black Cottage Alchemy on Facebook, or blackcottagealchemy.com. There's a whole line of products, but I promote specifically, it's called Becky's Body Butter, and it really is good. You can use it for rashes. I mean, you could probably eat it, and there's a lot of good stuff in it. Tochi Products, if you want to get down and do some shopping anyway, Tochi Products has those items in there. Tell them Wilson sent you. Thanks again, Black Cottage Alchemy, for sponsoring this show. I thank everybody for listening. I appreciate it. I certainly do. I'd like to say that if you educate yourself so you can educate others, then one education time at a time, step by step, we can rock this out. Because again, anybody that wants to kick sugar, maybe I would refrain from something else too. And we'd see what was hardest, because I would argue that there's a lot of sugar-related diseases and symptoms of, a lot of horrible disorders that kind of, when you looked at it, it was sugar as the culprit. And so I think we would be all doing ourselves a service in our quality of life if we stopped the sugar and picked up the cannabis. And again, you don't have to smoke it. That is the least, healthy way to do it. But there's 1,000 ways to do it that it's just a supplement in your day. Just like, like you take whatever, like herbal supplements that you would take. It's almost similar to that. So anyway, thanks for checking us out. I'm out of here. Canna-Talk ND with Wilson. Every Thursday here on Radio Free Fargo, 95.9. Again, I am out of here. We'll see you next Thursday. Peace. Peace. Peace.